Number 4, organizing media. In this lesson, we're going to use the project panel. We're going to stay organized with bins. We'll add some clip metadata. We'll use essential playback controls. We'll interpret some footage. And lastly, we'll make some changes to our clips. Now, as we go and we start working with our media, as I said, this is going to be something that the organization is really going to be up to you as to what method you use. We're going to go through one inside of here dealing with really building folders. We'll talk about changing label colors. You can really go as far into this as you want to go in and work. So we're going to navigate in and open up our project from that lesson 4 project. So inside the lessons, we'll select OK once again, just that it's gone and update it. Now, you may find, of course, this link media. If there's footage inside of there, you need to know where that footage is at. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to select it. You will notice there's one video there, or one clip that shows up, that audio one. That was our scratch track we made. It recorded that, it saved that, so it still does exist. And then inside of here, we're going to start to look at where do we find these things at. We see where we have them before. So we need to go in and navigate and find that item. So we're going to say locate. And remember, across the top, it's going to give us a little hint. So there was our username, folders, media, lessons, assets. So we know we're probably going to be working towards our lessons that we have inside of here. So our 187, we can come in here to assets. And then with that, we know it's in graphics. And then it's the unexpected layered. We move down here, unexpected layered.psd. We can say OK on that. Any files that it recognized, it automatically went back in there and relinked. We're on to the next one. So here we're looking for the Seattle skyline. So again, we're going to locate. It's in the stills. So if we're in here to assets, stills, city, Seattle skyline, okay. And then it should go through and find the rest of them. Now, once you're in here, you may choose to go ahead and save this. I'm going to go ahead and save it just because I don't want to have to go back in and relink all those files. Plus, I've made a major step in importing all of the footage into here. So we have this in. We were working with that project panel before. Once again, we can go ahead and we can select that and use the Graves key to go ahead and see our project in here. So what we have is we're going to see some bins already in here. So there's theft unexpected layered bin. We got that stills bin that's up there. And we're going to go in and start to understand a little bit more about what all is in here, what's available to us to work with. Now, as we talked a little bit on lesson 3, up here we have the panel name. So we see we have our project panel. There's the name of the file. These are additional panels that are available to us, depending on what we have inside of our project. You may see things in those. You may not see things in those, especially since right now we don't have markers in there. So I don't think there's any markers left. So there's no markers. So when we go into that, we're not seeing anything. If we had chapter markers with names, we would see those all listed inside of there. We do have the ability to go in and search. So if we're looking for certain things, we're going to go in here and we can search for some stuff. We can see out here, what do we have? Clips versus sequences versus just audio. We go and we start looking at our views down here. Do we want to lock it? So we can lock the project, meaning we can't write anything with the project. We can come over here and we look at our list view, our icon view, and our freeform view that we worked with and looked at as we went and dealt with importing footage. We can move over here. There's also the ability to come in here and start to work with automate to sequence. So when we go through, and we will do that at one point, go ahead and grabbing images, and we can automatically put them into a sequence where they're back to back. We can go in here, we can actually find something. We can go ahead and click on new bin, or we can go down here to new item. So we have the bin itself, that's our folder. We have the new item, which is the piece of paper. Then we of course have trash, so if we have something selected, we can go ahead and we can delete what is there as well. Column headings all the way across the top, which allows us to go in and decide what it is that we want to do with them. And of course, up at the very top, if we wanted to, we can come here, we can start to deal with what exactly we're working with, workspaces, and that are all visible up here. So we can change workspaces inside of this, even when we have a major panel expanded out. If for some reason we have this set up and there were a bunch of other panels all the way across here, the two arrows that you see across the top dealing with the workspaces and paneling up here would show up to allow us to select a panel that might be hidden. That mainly is visible when we actually don't have this maximized. And then you'll see right there, we have the ability to go ahead and look at the other items that are inside of there. Using that Graves key is very beneficial as you go through and start to look at stuff, working with individual panels. If you're going and doing edits inside of the timeline, it works really well on actually expanding out the timeline. In here, we're organizing our content is another great way to do it because we're not stuck with just a little tiny space to be able to work. So it's maximizing what it is we're able to go through and use in here. And lastly, of course, there's the panel menu. It's a little 3 lines or the hamburger menu to the right of it. Depending on what panel we're in, we'll have different things available to us. But in here we can see close panel and dock panel, which allows us to break it apart if we want to go through and move it. So now if we want to go and we want to customize what's inside of here. If we go and go up to our panel menu up here, we have the ability to go ahead and look at a preview. So right now we see, as we look at our basic list view, we just have a little icon indicating to us what type of file it is. If you go down here towards the bottom, you'll see preview area. If you go ahead and turn that on, it gives us a preview on the top. Well, right now we're not seeing anything up there because nothing's selected. If I go through and I select, in this case, cutaways or any of the files that have video content, what's going to happen with that is it's going to allow us to see that preview up there. Now, as we look at that preview area, what does it tell us? Well, it tells us a lot of information. So up here we can see, what do we have for poster frames? As we go through and we move this, talk a little bit more about poster frame or setting a poster frame. That's what we're going to have with that. We can go ahead and we can play it. Yes, in this preview, we can go ahead and click on the little play, and it's going to go ahead and play it. We can see a little snippet of it as it goes across there. It's tiny, but will allow us to quickly see maybe content that we want to look at. Gives us a name. We have our file extension. We see it's a movie. We see what the frame dimensions are. We see how long it is. We see the frame rate, and we also see audio if audio is in here. So this is all information that's available to us up here inside of our preview. So we can see what is there. Now as we go through and we start to look at and begin to work with these items, we can go into freeform. If I jump over into freeform, there it is. I'm not going to move these all around right now, but you are able to do that and use the space however you would like. Of course, we can jump back over to our icon view, and we go through and we see this. We'll jump back over to list, just because the list gives us a lot more information inside of here. So as you're going through and looking at and processing and moving things, that's where you're going to be at. If you're trying to start to question what do you have for durations, we can start to look at that inside of here as well. How these are sorted is completely up to you. If we come in here and we click on name, you'll see that you get the arrow that shows up over here. So in this case, we're ascending. So we go all the way up to from our audio one into bright, so alphabetical. If we want to start the other, we can go ahead here with theft. So depending on names you're looking for. If we're looking at frame rate, you can go ahead and you can actually sort by frame rate. You can sort by media duration. If we want to expand out because we can't see something, we can go ahead and we can do that by simply going up here between any of these. Sometimes you'll get in here and the way it's set, maybe you're sitting here and you're truncating part of the media start. We got to drag that out. The name itself, we want to be able to see all of the names. So maybe we're going to go through and adjust that. Video info, you can go ahead and you can sort by that as well if you're looking at wanting these all to be grouped based upon what you have for frame dimensions. All of those are sortable content for us to go through and work. The other thing we have up here is the ability to go in and do a search. So if we come up here to the beginning of this and we start to type something in, so in this case we just type in JO, you're going to see that it goes in there, and the only stuff visible are the things that have a file with the JO on there. Now we are seeing the folders that are there with the stills and the theft unexpected layered, because inside of those there should also be hidden content that carries those same characters. So you can go in there and look to see if they're inside of there as well. We can click the little X on the right side of it. It'll just disappear or erase the stuff that's inside of our search box, which is going to allow us to get everything back out of here. The other thing we can do is we can go in here if we're talking about file extensions. What do we have inside of here? So in this case, we have that PSD for our .psd files, and I can drag this out as well. So we can see files that are inside of here. So if you are looking for specific file extensions, we can get those inside of here to pull that up. Now the other thing we also have is we have the ability to go in and do an advanced find. So we can go in and we can look at specific files. We can go in and find and ors. So maybe we're looking for something that has certain words that are continued inside of them. So we're going to go ahead and look at what can we do for our advanced find features with it. So we come down here and we go ahead and we click on the find in the lower right hand corner. So Command F is also your shortcut for that. It's going to pop up this find dialog box. So this is an advanced find. So what exactly are we looking for? Well, a column over here is what column is it going to go off of? If you click on the drop down, you're going to see all of those files or all of those columns that we see across the top out there. What is the operator? What do we want it to do? Does it contain something? Does it start with something? End with? Match exact? Does not contain? So are all things we can select to decide how we want to go in and work with that. And then what is it that we're looking for? Then we can do the same thing with another item over here. And then matching, what are we looking for? So if you think about it, are we looking for it to have all of these? So it has to have a certain name that has this in it. And if we were to change this off to a duration must match this. So those are all things that we can set in there. All, think of it as and, any, would be or. So as we go through to work with it, and then we also have the ability to go down here and be case sensitive. So if we want it to go in here and look at it from upper or lower case. So with John, if you typed in all lowercase, it wouldn't give us the capital J-O-H-N. So with that, know that that's available inside of there. And then once you do it, you'll click find. It will find those files. If not, then they won't show up. So we're going to click done. And I'll clear the content that was up inside of there so we get all of our stuff back again. So we go and we start thinking about it. Bins, again, folders. So if you prefer to use the word folder, some people will still just create a new folder for it. Bins is the technical term that's dealing with it from a standpoint as we start to think about bins with old rolls of film, actual reels, still make reels out there. So with that, we're talking about where things are stored at. So that's the bins. If you call them a folder, I won't get upset with it. So as we go and we start to work with it, and we start to work with the bins. Bins are going to allow us to organize everything that's in here. All of the clips. We can move sequences into a bin. Maybe you build multiple sequences that you are going to nest into it. So you organize the sequences and the files that are associated with those sequences in their bins. It's completely up to you. If you can find the information, to use the information to create what you need to create, it doesn't matter to me ultimately how you choose to organize them. Again, it goes back to the person in high school that had papers all over the place, but the moment you asked them for a certain piece of paper, you could just pick up the whole stack and pull that piece of paper out with no problem. So same type of thing with this as you go through and find it. Now as we go through to work with it, down in the lower right hand corner, it's where we're going to find the ability to go in and create a new bin. So if you go ahead and you click on that, what's going to happen is it's going to create you a new bin. As it creates the new bin, you're going to notice that the name is highlighted because it's going to assume that you're creating this and you want to give it a name. You're not just going to have a bunch of bins called bin. Maybe you are. I don't want to work on your project, but maybe you are. So get used to at least naming the bins. Again, I don't get too caught up on naming layers and stuff like that in other applications. But in here, you do want to name the bin so you know what is in there. So let's just go ahead and call this theft unexpected. Now, as we go through and do that, we're going to hit return. That'll commit the name. But what happens when you hit return? It moves down to the next thing and highlights it. So if we go through and we start to build stuff up, if you start with an empty project and you build up your bins to where things are going to go, you could put a bunch of bins in here, type the first one out, return, next one, return, next one, return. This allows us to quickly rename things. But it does allow us to even rename any other files that are inside of here. So we can go through here and we can sit there and just keep hitting return, typing out return to rename stuff. If we simply come down here and we just click away from it, it will allow us to break away from that so we're not naming something else. Now, that's probably going to be one of the main ways that you use it. The other thing, when we get to the shortcut keys to go in and create another bin, may be the way that you choose to go to. Most people don't choose to go to the file menu, but we can come up here to file new, and inside of here you will find bin. So when we do that, the same thing is going to happen. It's going to create a new bin. It's going to highlight that bin, so we can go ahead and give it a name at this point. So we're going to call it graphics. Like I said, I hit return. It went down through there. Now once we have that, we can also go into a blank area. We can right click and say new bin. So as long as we're in a blank area in the project, we can do that. New bin, once again, pops up. Let's go ahead and call this one Illustrator Files. We can create ourselves a bin, a new bin, and put something in there by actually dragging a file into that location. So if we go into, I think it's under the Stills City, the Seattle skyline. Nope, it's not the movie though. So we're going to drag a file into it and put it into a new bin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I'm not seeing the file that they want us to use. I'm just going to use a different video since we'll. So I'm just going to grab a hold of one of these videos. If we grab that and we bring it over here on our new bin, so down there in the lower right, and we let go of that, you're going to see it gives us a new bin. It also goes in there and moves that file into there. So that way, if we go through and we start working with multiple clips, we can go in there and we can build those files into there. In this case, they call this one City Views, even though it's not, HS John is not a city view. There just isn't the, oh, let me go. It's in here. Nope. But that's another way we can create it after you bring something in to go ahead and create additional bins. We can select multiple items and drag them over there, and it'll create a bin with all of those selected items. Now, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to create ourselves one more. We can do that by hitting Command B. And with that, there's our nice new bin, and we'll just go ahead and call this Sequences. So that'll allow us to go in and create those. Now, at any time, we can go through and we can move information around in here. So, for example, I went in there and just drug the HS John out of the one that I created called City Views, because that's not a city view. So if you do accidentally drop something in there, we can go in and simply remove it that way as well. So as we go through and we start working with stuff, some people will say, well, you know, I don't really have that much stuff, so why do I need to organize it? Or why can't I just leave all of my files sitting out there? Well, you can if you want to. But again, as we go through and we start to work with it, the more that we organize stuff, the easier it is for us to go in and work, because we can work with disclosure arrows and that to only see the content that we currently want to be working with. So let's go ahead and start to move some of this stuff around. So as I mentioned, I already pulled the one clip out, that HS John out. We start to look at what do we have inside of here that we want to move into these areas. So if we look inside of some of these other folders, we may find additional content inside of here. So if I toggle open that theft unexpected layered portion, we can start to see what is here. Well, we have this AI logo here. So I can grab a hold of that and I can drag it up there and drop it into the Illustrator file so it goes in to that space. If we have this theft unexpected PNG, we can go ahead and we can drag that up here and we can drop that into graphics. We can do the same thing even with the rest of these if we want to. We can pull these completely out of here, or we could take the whole bin that we have inside of here and move these up into the graphics. So at that point, if we decide that's what we're going to do, maybe we want to go ahead and put this one back into here. Or that one wasn't in there to begin with, that's the PNG. So we can drag these around and we can work with those and continue to move the files around as we go through to use them. Premiere knows where they're at. So as we go through, if we start organizing stuff after we've worked with something, it still knows where that file is at. So you shouldn't have any issues with it continuing to play. So this does allow us to go in to continue to move items in there. We have that first sequence. We can go ahead and grab that first sequence and drag and drop it into sequences. If you look at the other ones you have down there, if any of these you want to move into a location, we can go and we can move those into there as well. So let's go ahead and we start looking at what else is left. So we have, if I go up here and toggle these up so when we're not seeing them, we have this logo here. That's the Illustrator file. It can come into there too. Now as we go through and we start to work with things, what you're going to notice is we can get duplicates in here. These can all point to the same thing. What's interesting as you come into work with them is you could then essentially come in here and name this something else. We have one that's called logo, one that's called Bright Love Film logo. They both point to the exact same file. So as we go through to start to work with things, understand as you start to rename stuff, make sure if you have a duplicate somewhere else, because you may put stuff in multiple folders as you start to work with it, especially if you're working, like say I talked before about nesting, and you nest them and you decide, well, I want the logo to be in each one of those so I don't have to keep going back to somewhere else and grabbing the logo. Then just, if you rename it in one, just be aware it's in the rest of those as well, and it's not going to automatically change its name. And then we'll go ahead and we'll come in here and let's just grab, well, we'll take that audio file while we're at it. Click on the top one, hold down Shift, we'll click on the bottom one. Let's just go ahead and drag these in and drop those in the Theft Unexpected folder. So now if we were to toggle all of our folders closed, what you're going to see is that our bins are collapsed, and as we collapse the bins, what we end up with is something that's nice, clean, and easy for us to go in and work with. So this does allow us to go in and use the items that are inside it. So we have that Theft Unexpected. If we come here in sequences, there's the sequence. If we come here to Illustrate files, there's those stills. There's our graphics. If we want to use and take this Theft Unexpected layered, for example, we can copy it, or this PNG copy, and we can come down here and we can paste it into that. So once again, we have that PNG file not only in the graphics but also inside of our Theft Unexpected. So it's all about what workflow you ultimately end up choosing, or how you decide you want to work. That's going to play into ultimately how you're going to end up deciding to manage everything that is here. Now, as we go through and start to work with stuff, sometimes you're using a file. If you're working on stuff and you brought new content into your project, that's where this may actually be beneficial, especially if you've just downloaded it and you open it and you weren't thinking about where it was saved at. We can go and we can find where are the media files located in the Finder. So as we go through and we start to think about it from the standpoint of your machine, or we can talk about it in Explorer, since it's what Windows works off of, the file browser. So if we come here and we start to look at something. So for example, let's go ahead and we'll locate that Audio 1 WAV file. That's something we just created. Do I know where it's at? No, I don't, because it was saved when I saved it. So I'm not really sure where that's at. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on that Audio 1 WAV file. If you come down here where it says Reveal in Finder, You click on that. It's going to go out here and show me right where that is currently at. So there it shows up under in a folder called lesson 03_1. So that's where this is currently located at, which allows me then to know that. So on any file that's used inside of a project, you can locate that. Now, if we go back into Premiere, so I'm just going to go ahead and close that window and jump back over here into Premiere. If I come into Premiere and I have that audio one-wave file selected and I choose to delete it, I can just hit the delete key on the keyboard. I could also come down to the lower right-hand corner and I could use the trash can to delete it as well. If we go ahead and we delete that file, it's going to come up and let you know that the selection you are deleting contains clip references in one or more sequences. If you continue, these clip references will also be deleted. Do you want to continue? If we say yes, it's going to remove it from the projects panel. It's also going to remove this file from any sequence in which it currently exists. So if you're going in there to remove something, understand essentially the ripple effect that can occur by removing something like that. If you want it just because you don't want it in the current project anymore or in the timeline piece of it, just remove it from the timeline. Because once I say yes, then it's going to go ahead and remove it from everywhere else. So now we have that all gone. If I were to go back and check inside of the storage setup, should have left my Finder window open. Audio 1. Is that what it was called? Audio. So there's the audio one wave. So as we go through and look at it, where exactly is this? There's the whole rundown of it. That file still exists. So just because we removed it in the project doesn't mean that it's no longer on there. Something to keep in mind if you run into an issue when you start running out of space, or if you start running out of space, is that simply deleting it out of your project is not going to remove any space, because that is a very tiny file that, remember, is pointing back out to the original. So if you have original stuff that you don't want, that's taking too much space, you could go in there and ultimately delete that out of there. Now, as we're inside of our bins, like I said, you can choose what view you want to work with. You can control how large the thumbnails are by running with the slider across the lower left-hand side of the page. When we're in icon view, how large do you want them to be? So the same controls inside of our bins. You'll see the name of the bin across the top. So while as we look at this, you may see it or think it looks a lot like the media browser or even the project for that matter. This is a separate one. This is the bin itself. We can have multiple bins that can be open as we go through and work with them. We can also always come up here and undock the bin if we want to and allow this to float around. Or we can go in and we can close it. As we go through, we can adjust how things get sorted. So down here we also have sort options. So remember we went through lists and we clicked on the actual header to do the sorting? On this, we're going to simply come down here to the bottom. We're going to select this. We're going to choose what we want our sort order to be. Again, we can go into video codecs if we want to look at that. We can go and we can look at the names. If we have tape names in here, we can do that so it clumps everything together on their individual tapes. If we jump over to our list view, again, we can increase and decrease the size that we have as we go into work with this. Now, as we use this, you're going to notice on the left-hand side, the icon that's there. This icon can be beneficial right now on a simple view that we see that we have a film strip, and we also see that we have the audio wave icon showing there. That lets us know that we have both video content and audio content. If you bring something in that's just audio, you won't see the film strip. If you have something that's just video with no audio, you will not see the audio wave that is on there. And of course, the one at the top is just indicating that that actually is a graphic. As we go through to work with this, you may want to see other information. Maybe you don't want to see that it's showing just the film strip. You want to see a preview of that. Well, we go ahead and we come up here to the panel menu. Down here we have thumbnails. If you toggle thumbnails on, you will then see the thumbnail there on the left-hand side. We can go ahead and now adjust the size at the very bottom of the panel all the way to the right. making those thumbnails as large as they can be. Because what that does by zooming is it extends the height of each one of those rows. It allows us to see more information that is there. Now what you're seeing as you look at that thumbnail, that is the first frame of the media. Now you may like that, you may not like that. When we go over to the icon view, we're looking at the clips. We can go in here just like the other stuff, we can drag through them. If you click on something, we can go ahead and use our JKL. To go ahead and work through these. That's the nice thing as you get used to this, get in here working, is the fact that the controls in each one of these panels do the same thing. So we can go ahead and we can navigate what's in here. So we can look at stuff in the bin versus looking at stuff in the project panel. The advantage to this too is, of course, the bin stays to where it's at. I can come here and I can jump back over the project if I'm looking at something else that is inside of here. So inside of here, I can jump into here. Now I'm into the bin for the still, so that's going to show up top here. So now I can quickly go between things. If I don't want a bin open, so I don't want the stills here, I can close that one, but I still have my Eagle one open. So as you go through to start to work with them, you can open these up. We can view these. Right now, as I said, these are set up on thumbnails. This allows us to scrub through here, so we can still scrub what's inside of here. If you find ones that you don't like this one here, when we look at it from the standpoint of this clip doesn't identify anything to us. We can go ahead and we can move this out to a location and then decide, okay, this is something that I want to have. We can go ahead and hit I. What I ends up doing is it goes in and it creates us a different poster frame. We can do the same thing, come out here, and we can hit it right here again and reset that to that poster frame. So now we're not in here just looking at something that doesn't make any sense to us. This here, what's it doing for us? Nothing. We can't see it. The clacker's in the way. So we can come out here and say, okay, well, this is what I want to look at. This is what I have. So again, I can hit I. Creates a different frame. Same thing over here. What are we trying to get out of this? We can go ahead and hit I once again, and we can set that back into its setup. So these are called poster frames. So what is it you're trying to get out of this? So we can come in here and adjust these so that it makes more sense. So what are our views that we're working off of? So it allows us to go ahead and choose what we have in there. If we jump back over now to our list, you're going to see that those same poster frames are going to remain. So depending on what it is that you have inside of there, we can go in and adjust those. Now in this list view, you're going to notice on the far left that everything that's inside of here actually has a label color to it. You can go in, you can change label colors to these if you want to. So if we go ahead and jump back over here to the project and go to a list view. If we come back over here, we have this theft unexpected bin. If we go inside of there, there's our theft unexpected PNG. You'll notice that it has like this lavender color to it. We can go ahead and we can adjust what is there if we want to change that. So what do we want to do for our labeling on it? So we can go ahead and we can adjust the label colors for these. So what do we want to work with? What do we want to make inside of here? So for that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to change the label color. So we're going to go ahead and click on that, right click on that and drag all the way down. You're going to see label. We go through, we start looking at the label groups. Typically how this works is it starts when you create the first thing. It kind of works from a hierarchical order and works its way down from violet to iris, to Caribbean to lavender, to cerulean to forest, to rose, mango, purple, blue, teal, magenta, tan, green, brown, yellow. We're going to go ahead and we're going to change this one here from the lavender over here to forest. Now if we wanted to, we could change a bunch at the same time. If I came up here into theft unexpected, and I chose that. And I went ahead and decided label forest. It's going to adjust the upper level. The other ones aren't going to change. We should be able to come in here if we wanted these ones to be something else. We can come in there and select multiples, and at this point we can turn around and say we want those to be mango. So they will go in there and they will change. If you change them and you want to change them back, you can hit Command Z. But one thing to know though is if you change your labels for multiple things, you'll see as you do Command Z, it does them one at a time. Because even though we did them as a group, the way that the scripting works to process that is it just automatically goes through, and it works so fast that it goes through and changes those. So if you go ahead and hit Command Z, you can go ahead and keep going back and undo those items back. So you can go ahead and undo them all the way back if you want to get to the other one back into its lavender color. If we go through and we change something inside of the project, well, out inside of the actual timeline and in our sequence, you may end up with things out there that'll be color coded. This is an interesting part because all they're going to tell you is they may or may not update. Well, obviously those are your two options. So as you go through and you make those changes to it, they may or may not update out inside of it, even if you save it and come back into it. So if you're seeing colors change, I would recommend if you are one of those people that wants to go in and change the labels before you start dropping stuff into your sequence. Otherwise, it's possible that the colors aren't going to match up. So when you look at your sequence, you're going to say, well, that should be a still frame. Wait, why that color's not right? It's because you changed it after the fact and it didn't update. So just keep that in mind as you go through and you change them. As we saw before, when we go through and we start changing names, just because you change the name in the actual project panel, it is not going to change the name somewhere else. If we go through and we create a duplicate of one, it's not going to change the name somewhere else. So if I come in here, for example, and I have this theft unexpected, and I hit return, and I just call this logo graphic. It's now called logo graphic. The other thing I can do is if I go ahead and right click and I say reveal in Finder, notice it's still called theft unexpected.png. It's not going to change any of that stuff. So once again, if you're going to change names on stuff, I recommend that that be part of your importing before you get it into Premiere, is to go in and make any name changes you want to do with them. So that way they're already in there when you bring them in. Otherwise, it might get a little confusing as you go through to start searching for those different files. We've gone through, we can review footage, again, inside of the bins, exactly like we can anywhere else. We can hover scrub. So if we're inside the bin, you can, of course, hover over it. I'm going to jump out to the icon. Hover over and scrub. Same thing that we had in our project panel. Left edge is the beginning, right edge is the end. If we want to go and select it and make something else as our main poster frame, simply using I. Now, if we have one selected inside of here, like I said, JKL still works. So you can go ahead and you can work your way through each of those items as it plays itself out. Now, if we go through and start to work with these, where we're going to end up then really truly starting our edit stuff is going to be in our source monitor. So I'm going to bring that back down. Actually, I lied. I'm going to bring it back up for a second. One other thing to notice inside of here is that if you're wondering if there's audio, yes, as you go and click and play it, you'll hear it. But the other thing in the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see down here the wave indicating that there's audio as well. So there it says contains linked audio. Let's go ahead and click on a few of these. And once we go ahead and have these set, now we can go ahead and we can open these up into our source monitor. So if we have multiple selected, you'll see here open in source monitor. On a right click will allow these to all go into there. So that's one way we can get them into there. Otherwise, if we came in here, if I double click on this, it's going to automatically go up into the source monitor. If I double click on this, it's going to go into the source monitor. But the advantage we have by choosing multiples, doing this and saying open in source monitor, is the fact that we don't have to go through there and keep clicking on the files. Now inside of the source monitor, you're going to notice that some of these had different poster frames. When we brought them into the source monitor, you'll notice this one here jumped right to the beginning. if we come up here to the panel menu for the source monitor, what you will find then down below there, those are the different ones that have all been opened up. So if you went in there and did that, and you're like, well, where'd the rest of them go? Why didn't I get a bunch of different ones up top? That's because it's going to go and it's just going to show you one item at a time inside of that source monitor. These are all the recent ones. It'll go through and start working, the ones that are open and able to adjust. We can come in here, we can click on the next one. It's going to go to that next clip. With these up, if we hit the space bar, it's going to go ahead and play. If we hit L, it's going to play. If we hit K, we can stop it. If we hit J, it'll go backwards. This allows us to go in and play those forward and backwards. The other thing we have the ability to do is the right arrow key is going to move forward by 1 frame. The left arrow key is going to move us back by 1 frame. So as we go through and we start to work with our navigation, we don't have to use just what is inside of our source monitor to go in and use these. And we go and begin to work. What is it that we're looking at? So there are zoom functions down in the lower left-hand corner. By default, it's going to be on fit. If we go ahead and we click on that, you're going to see other options that show up. So if we go to 100%, what can be our advantage of 100%? Quality. So if we start to look at it from a standpoint of being able to see quality, this is going to let us know what our pixels are going to look like at full size. So if you go in here and you have something that is in there, you go to 100% and it's really grainy, you're going to have problems. So it allows us to go in there. By default, it will be set to fit. That's just going to zoom to fill up what we have set for our source monitor based upon the current size of the monitor. Now, as I mentioned down in the lower left-hand corner, we also then have, that's the actual playhead position. This is the time code stamped onto that. Don't mistake that for duration. Duration is over here on the far right-hand side in the gray. So it's letting us know our duration. That duration is based on our in point and our out point. So as we go through and we start to select how much we're wanting to have. So think about your shots projects. On those, you select the first one. When you select your in point, when you select the out point, there should be 10 seconds there. So that way we see 10.00. If you're right exactly on the frames, don't be surprised when it says 9:29, just because of the way it runs. So that's there. This here, we went into our settings. So this does allow us to go back in and see the settings related to our source. That's what the wrench is for. It's all about settings. So how do we want to go through and work with these? And we'll talk a little bit more about what we're dealing with on playback controls and adjustments in a moment. And then here we have then how we're playing back. So full means full resolution. Right now it's set to half, so when it's playing back, it's just playing at half. Don't worry, in here it's played at half. If we move it into the timeline, it's still going to be linked back to its full file. When we actually export it out, it will be set to full. This is just really set for its playback purposes as we go through to preview what is in here. So you can see a little bit even change in the quality as this is set. Once I hit the space bar, you can see it gets a little fuzzy. When you stop it, you'll see that essentially the pores and the wrinkles in the face all come back full. That's because it's dropping it down still at half resolution just for our preview purposes, for our editing purposes as we go through and work with it. Now these across the bottom that we're looking at then allows us to go ahead and choose what we have for dragging our video and also dragging our audio into it. So if we're going in for an edit and we only want the audio, we can drag just the audio portion into there. If we only want the video portion, grab the video portion, drag, and drop it down into there. The bottoms that we have across, or the buttons we have across the bottom of this panel, we have our add marker. Shortcut on that is M. As you go through and start to work with stuff, as you start to break up clips, especially if you have like a long shot that you're planning to use pieces of and cut away from and cut back to, you might go and put markers so you're identifying areas that you're going to be using. This goes ahead and sets our in point. Shortcut again for that is the I key. We have our out point. Shortcut is O. We can go to the in point. This just simply means it's going to move the playhead over to the in point. We come back here. We can go and step back 1 frame. Remember, to the left will be our left arrow key. We also can go ahead and click on here for play and stop. Spacebar will do that. We can also stop it by pressing K. And we can step forward 1 frame or use our right arrow key as well. We can go to out, so it'll jump to the out point. Up here starts the deal when we start doing edits. As we go ahead and we identify areas. We have an insert. That's where it goes down. We'll insert it based upon where the playhead is at inside of our timeline. The next is overwrite. Again, still based on where it's at, it's going to drop it in. So if you drop 5 seconds in, it's going to go directly over top of 5 seconds from your playhead to the right. So if we go with the insert, it drops it in but pushes everything else over. So if there's already 10 seconds of video in there and we do an insert in the middle of that, we're going to end up with 15. If we do an overwrite in the middle of it, we're still going to be at 10 because it's going to overwrite 5 seconds of it. So just know what you're going in there and working with. And then this allows us to export an individual frame. So if you wanted to export out just one frame as an image, that's what we can do by going in and clicking on that area. As I said on this, we can lower the playback depending on what you have. This typically defaults out to half for our projects. You'll see on here there's the option for quarter, eighth, and 16th. This is all based upon what is the resolution of the actual original source file. So if the source file is a red file, 1/16 is going to be available to you. In this case, based on these, the lowest that they're letting us go down to is a quarter. Now, as we go down and we put these on, when you first select that, some people select it and go, oh, I didn't notice any difference. Well, you're not going to notice a difference until you actually play it. So now that this is set, if I hit the space bar to play it, now you're going to see how it drops down the resolution even more. Once you stop it, it's going to default again back to its full resolution. Now, how do we control that? Well, if we go into the wrench, this is going to allow us to go in here and make some changes to this. So what is it that we want to see? What is it that we want to work with? If we jump inside of here, we have our playback resolution. That's the one that we can set in the drop down. The other one we have here is our paused resolution. So if you find that it's having trouble for whatever reason, even sitting here paused having it, or maybe you don't want to have all that quality on there because it's eating up resources, we could change our pause resolution to be a quarter as well. And now you'll see when I go from here to playing it, there's no change because the pause resolution and the play resolution match up. Now, why you would ever do it the opposite way, I don't know, but we could go through and we could edit it because I don't do it this way. We could edit that so now when I play it, notice it goes to its full quality. So I guess you maybe want to sit here and you don't want to eat up resources while it's going through and pause. You could do that. But typically what we're going to have is your playback is going to be set to full and your pause resolution is going to be set at something a little bit less. So we're going to set that down here, setting it at half. The other thing we can also do inside of here is to come in here and set up our safe margins. So when we start talking about safe margins, the outside bars, so if we turn this on, the outside bars indicate our action safe areas. Now what are those? Those are areas where we want to make sure any key essential actions are going to take place inside of this. Because what's going to happen as it goes onto a screen, it scales it a little bit. The newer screens have very, very minimal because 16:9 has become such a standard in most places that most of your TV screens are that way. Now, if they aren't exactly 16:9, then yes, you're going to lose some pixels in those areas. So those are the areas we want to keep it inside of. Any action should stay inside of that area. The middle one then is our title safe area. This is designed even when we go in on something that is the worst display you could possibly find. You're still going to be able to see the graphics that are on there, the graphics and text that you want people to be able to look at and read. For example, if you find some hotels still have some old TV screens up, or they buy the cheapest TV screen they can buy, and then you're trying the ticker that's scrolling across the bottom, you only see the top half of it, and you have to use your mind to try to figure out what exactly it's still saying. So with that, you want to make sure that stuff stays inside of that title safe area, so even on those poorest ones, we're not going to lose that content. Now as we go through and we start to look at what's inside of here, we have our video and our audio that are available to us. As I said, we can click and we can drag that down onto it. We can use those for that function. The other thing we can also do for it is if we click on the audio one, it will give us the wave. So we can see exactly what the audio looks like. If I click back on the video, it'll take me back to the video. This is very beneficial when you're going in there if there's like you recorded something and you're trying to figure out where the action starts at, because you know there's some time beforehand that was you rolled it and then you had the action start with the audio and stuff, and you want to start to clip that stuff out. Just simply clicking on that will allow us to go back and see that, so that I can say, well, there's this talk here. I want to get to the other side of that audio, and that's where I'm going to be working from. So I could do that and then set an endpoint there to build it up based on using the audio as opposed to watching and listening. And to get back to it, we can just go ahead and click back on the film strip, and that's going to allow us to jump back into this area. We can go in and also work on the buttons. So if you have buttons down here on the bottom, or there's buttons that are missing, over here on the far right, you're going to see we got the little plus. That's going to bring up our button editor. So what you'll see on here, these are the other buttons that are available to you. So for example, go to next marker, go to previous marker. If you're putting a bunch of markers in, you want to be able to jump from marker to marker for the standpoint of, let's just say you're doing subclips. When we get to the point of doing subclips, you have all these markers in there, so you want to jump to them, set an in point, jump, set an out point, export out as a subclip. That's one thing you might want the controls for that. The one that they're going to push for is this one right over here called loop playback. So we go and we grab that, we can drag it down here, we can drop it into our bar here for our controls. And then what will happen is this will allow us, anytime it plays, it'll automatically keep looping what the content is. You can put that on there if you want to. You don't have to. If you don't, you can click cancel, you'll see it disappears. This is something you can work with. The machine you're sitting at, my guess is most likely you're going to be the only one at that machine this semester. So if you were to change button controls, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. It's just, again, on a shared machine. If you start changing stuff around, typically what I say is it's probably okay to add buttons, just don't remove any. So you can go in, decide what all you want to place in there. Now, you can go in freeform and make a big deal out of freeform in the newest section, mainly because of the function that's available to you to go through and use. I'm not one where freeform really is, to me, that great, because I guess I'm not one that really uses what's there. But let's go back into our project panel. I'm going to go ahead and expand that and make sure nothing is selected inside of here. And let's go into our media browser, I guess. Make sure nothing's selected. I'm going to go here, and let's just, play with some of the stuff that's in here. So we have the ability to come down here, like I said, and let's choose one that actually has freeform in it. We'll go to our bin here. So let's jump over here and we'll look at freeform. Like I said, you can drag these around. What are you building with this? I'm not really sure the concept here. My guess would be if we want to rough in something, and I know that this here goes with his here, which goes with this here, and then I'm going to go ahead and bring this one down here to edit these clips together. Could be a way to work with it if you wanted to. So another, I guess, added step to being able to go in and organize your clips inside of the individual bins. But again, it's not something that I go in and use. Now, as we go through and we start to work with this, we can decide what exactly do we want to be able to go in and adjust. So these are our freeform view options. So what exactly are we looking at? So in this case, we're going to see metaline 1 is our name. Metaline 2 ends up being none. So you can go through and use those. Again, if you like them, keep them. If you don't, right now there was nothing on the second line, so we could do audio duration if you wanted to. Actually, let's do media duration. We say okay, so now you'll be able to see even the timeline underneath of those as well. So you could go through, I guess, in this sense with the freeform, move these things around to set them up. If we go ahead and we right-click anywhere away from what is inside of here, after you move these around, you decide you don't like it anymore, you can come in here to reset to grid. And then you can choose exactly what it is that you want to reset them by. So if I say reset to grid by name, it's going to put them back in the way that they were before. As you go through and work with it, if you find that you have a good use for that, or other than like I just showed you, possibly doing a real quick mock-up as to how the clips are going to play their way through or the order they should be in. Let me know and we can look at that. Now, as we get into working with files inside of here, we have the ability to go through and work with audio. Now, there are a lot of advanced audio management features that are available inside of here, different ways we can go through and use this stuff. The thing to know that we're not going to get deep into audio with this. We're going to talk about the audio tracks. We're going to use the audio tracks. We're going to talk about editing the audio, dealing with transitions inside of there. But we're not going to get into heavy recording. Most of the stuff that you have is going to come off of one mic. That one mic is going to put it into a left and right, a stereo track. It's going to be inside of the audio. And you're going to see them both connected together in audio one header. Will show up, and there's going to be the audio. We're not going to get into a lot of stuff. Yes, there are some simple adjustments we can do. We'll talk a little bit about audio effects and how we can go through and cut out certain sounds that are there that are constants that you want gone. We can do that to isolate things. But we're not going to get really heavy into the audio parts of it and editing audio channels and stuff like that. But when we get to audio, which I think is like 13 or somewhere back in there, at that point in time, we will look at what we can do with audio, fix some audio with it. So how do we go about improving what it is? So we're going to edit and mix audio. It looks like I think it's 10 and 11 is dealing with audio. So you have the understanding of what we can do with audio. At that time, we'll look at what the audio channels are able to do and how we can modify them. Lastly, as we go through and we start working with stuff, we might need to go in and merge some clips. Now, if we go through and we merge clips together, maybe it's the setup to where we go through and we shoot the video, because it's not uncommon that we shoot video on one camera, we capture a high-def audio with another device. I still encourage you on whatever device you're using, even though you know that that's going to be what I'll call trash audio, keep it. Because what we'll end up doing with that is we can synchronize points with those. So we can go in and say, oh, okay, we have this. It's kind of like a clacker. We get the snap of that. We can adjust that on there so we can look at the sound, boom, boom, adjust them. A lot of times, even when I talk about that wave in the video file, we're going to be able to see that peak. We'll see the peak in the audio file itself. We can go ahead and we can set those as a sync point, and then we can go ahead and edit those clips together and merge those two clips. So now they'll function as one based upon that sync point. So as we go through to start to use it, just be aware as to how we're going to ultimately go through and merge what is there. And we're going to sync some stuff later on as we go through and begin to work both from a standpoint of external audio options and also how do we sync stuff when we start getting into, when we do a multi-camera edit, bringing multiple cameras into it and having those certain points. So as we go through and play it as us directing it, then we can control what camera we're seeing at what time, yet the audio and everything is always going to be synced up. So we're not going to get to a point where he says something, then whoop, it skips back and we end up losing the last 15 seconds of what it is that they were saying. We go in, we're going to start looking at what do we have for our footage and how are we going to go through and work with it or interpret the footage. If we go into our media browser and we navigate back into here, there's going to be this folder in here with this red video that's available to us. If I double click on this, this is a high resolution image. This is one where, as I said, we start getting up in there. So there's our 8 that shows up visible. Because as we go through and we start to work on playing back, let's see here, I hit the space bar. So we have this footage coming through here. Now, as this footage was actually shot, based on the way this camera is, it's much wider than standard 16:9, and you can see that just as it sits up inside of what is there. So what we need to do is we're going to have to go in and start to look at what can we do to this. So if I look at my project panel, so I'm just gonna, if we go and we look at this and we want to interpret what we have for our footage that is here. So if we can see properties based on this, we can see our image size here. It's 2816 by 2304. Let's look at duration. So this is another thing we can start to see if you're really wondering what's going on with the clip. Right click on that clip and just look at the clip properties. We can also go in then and we can adjust or we can interpret our footage. Now if we go through and we interpret our footage, what we're going to do is we're going to force this to go in and constrain how it's playing itself out into our project. So this isn't going to be in here anywhere, so let me do this. Is it not? Okay, so if we go through and we start to look at what we have for this footage. Here's a situation where we could create ourselves a proxy. So if we decide this is too large, we could come in here and create ourselves a proxy. If we come up, if we want to make a change to this is where we go and we start to set up. As we start to think about what we have on it, like I said, this is super wide. We already looked at the dimensions of it. We can come in here to modify. We can interpret our footage. This is a situation where we get to choose what exactly are we going to do with the footage. What are we going to have happen to it? Here you'll see the aspect ratio. Right now it's anamorphic, so it's 2:1. We can conform it down, in this case, to what setting do we want to have. So NTSC. And what starts to happen to this as we go through and we use it. This is our pixel aspect ratio. We can go ahead and we can drop it down into square pixels, so it's 1:1. We say OK, and then you'll see what happens to the video. So as you start to work with the footage, what is it that you are trying to go in and create? What are you trying to change with that? What do you want it to look like? We can come in here, we can conform this. If we go just to an NTSC widescreen, we say OK. So now it takes it to what we'd have as our regular widescreen. So 16:9. And you can see what happens, as we start to deal with the footage. So this is a way for us to go through and interpret video footage. It can work. It can work well. Other times, though, when we go with a drastic shift in what we just went with on this, you can see what's really happening with the pixels. So you can see the difference between the width of that as it sits here. Depending on what it is that you are filming, depending on what it is that you're trying to do with it, it can work or it can not work based upon, if you have people, it can start to, as we talk about non-scaling, because we're not scaling here, we're just squishing pixels to fit them into a box. It's going to change the way that it looks. So people, big thing with it. Outside of people, animals, depends on what the animal is, we could probably get away with. If we start looking at it from a scenic standpoint, if they're buildings, might be able to. If it's a landscape showing trees and stuff, you could certainly do that because no one knows how wide those trees are. So just kind of keep that in mind as you go through if you choose to interpret the footage. The main thing as you go and you start to begin to bring these things in is get the stuff prepared and organized, ready for you to work with it. So that way, when you get started on it, you start going into here, there aren't any surprises. So if you have footage that you know you need to change the aspect ratio of it, change it right away before you go in to start to edit the stuff. That way it doesn't play into and create a problem as it goes later on. So again, we're looking at it the standpoint, figure out what you're doing for importing the stuff, and then once you import the stuff, decide how you want to get the stuff organized for you to go through and work with it, and start building that workflow, working through that workflow, so that as you organize the media, it's a consistent way in which you do it.